My name is Chris White. I'm from Ecosystem, and I'll be your host for today's session. So Ecosystem is a technology research and consulting company. We are headquartered in Singapore, and I'm pleased that we are joined today by two very experienced technology leaders who are going to share their thoughts on what's going on in the world of on-premise cloud and hybrid computing. First up, we have Tim Sheedy, who is Ecosystem's VP of Research. Tim has over 20 years of technology research and advisory experience, and his main claim to fame is that he entered this industry because he had a ponytail. So that is a little bit of insight you may not have known about Tim. We are also joined by Harris Schneiderman. So Harris is the Worldwide Cloud Solutions Sales Director for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I'll be honest, it's going to take too long to go through Harris's background, but one thing I think everyone should know is that Harris, I believe you're certified in 116 different technologies. Is that correct?
Something like that, yeah.
Something
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm just going to give a quick overview of today's agenda. So first up, Tim is going to present some of Ecosystem's research, which talks about how organizations are evolving in their use of cloud computing. Harris will then talk a little bit about some of the areas where HPE is helping organizations. After that, Harris and Tim are going to have a quick conversation, quick Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to you. So what I'd like you to do is to make use of the Q&A button that we have. So please click the Q&A button and you can put your questions in there, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. We'll also have some polling throughout today's session. So when you see those come up on screen, please just click the options that are there, and then we'll show those results up on screen so you have an idea of how you compare to everyone else who's on this session today. So I do hope you enjoy what we go through today, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your experience more fruitful. So with the introductions out of the way, I would now like to hand over to Tim to get us started. Tim, over to you, please. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to quickly share my own screen here. Again, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are across the Asia Pacific region today. Thank you again for attending. We appreciate your, we're all very busy. So thanks for making the time today. So look, I'm going to present pretty quickly, just really setting the scene as to where organizations are with their cloud investments in the region at the moment. All the data I'm going to be, and insight I'm going to be including is from our latest Asia Pacific surveys that we've run across the region. I guess the punchline that I'm going to start with and hopefully finish with is that what we're seeing is hybrid cloud is where much of the investment is today. And most of that is because private cloud is now as simple, as cost-effective, as agile as public cloud for most businesses. So that's one of the big changes that's happened over the past few years, is that private cloud is no longer sort of the poor cousin to the public cloud partners, basically. So I'm going to start today with a poll question, though. And this is just a bit of a setting the scene to understand, what your thoughts are around, the current economic environment and how your business is performing. So if you could just quickly click one of the options on this, and then, after 15, 20 seconds, we will pop the results up on the screen. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I just wanted you to be able to benchmark your own organization against, some of your peers across the region today. So how are we going, Chris, with the results so far? Has everyone had a chance to start to vote?
People are still putting them in. Let's give it another second or two. All right. Okay, I think everyone has voted who wants to vote, so I'll end it and I'll bring it up on screen.
Okay, that's good, right? So, again, I don't want to talk about this too much, but I think it's great that we're generally optimistic, cautiously optimistic, across the region at the moment. And that's a pretty quick turnaround. I know there was a lot of negative sentiment earlier this year. So great to see that a lot of businesses are starting to look up now. So where are we with cloud investments in the region today? So this question that we asked is, what best describes your organization's cloud strategy? Similar to the next question that we'll have, but you'll see that there are some differences. And ultimately, what we see from the responses here, particularly with around half of organizations saying that they operate individual cloud workloads without real interaction between most of them, is that most organizations are multi-cloud. Now, they're either that on purpose or by design or by accident. A bunch of organizations in the region have made a very clear cloud strategy that we're going to put the workload where it makes the most sense. That might be on-premise, that might be in AWS, Azure, Google, Tencent, Alibaba Cloud, etc. Depending on the specific requirement of that workload, we choose the specific location for it. I think the reality is that most organizations ended up multi-cloud by accident, though, right? Our business peers went out and, we might have started as AWS, but then someone went out and went, actually, there's this really good analytics on that we want to do on Google. So they put some data out there. We then invested in Office 365 and started strengthening our investments in the Azure environment. We started investing in Edge, etc., and maybe brought that into a private cloud environment. And suddenly we look at our cloud workloads and they're everywhere. As I said, and it's interesting, this idea that there's not really much interaction between them. And the challenge with multi-cloud is it's lots of architectures, it's lots of skills that we need. It's new training we have to provide to the people in our business. It's even just lots of bills we get from lots of different cloud providers. And it adds complexity in our business. And look, the reason, if we remember why we went public cloud in the first place, it was to get rid of complexity. It was to be more agile, be more innovative. And being multi-cloud is starting to slow us down, starting to make it harder, particularly as we want to start moving data between cloud environments. As I said, we're running most of them on their own without much interaction, but with AI, we want to collect data from many environments and move them into one space. The same with analytics, etc. So that's starting to add real complexity in our business. And as we know, complexity is the enemy of agility. So what are we doing to solve this? Well, we're embracing hybrid cloud, right? As you can see, the two areas of growth on this chart since 2020 are hybrid cloud and public cloud. I don't want to pretend, and I'm not pretending here, that the public cloud providers won't continue to do well, because they will, but much of that will be under the guise of hybrid cloud. I ran a roundtable in Melbourne just a couple of days ago, actually, talking about this very topic, and pretty much everyone around the table agreed that they want to manage all of their cloud workloads through a single pane of glass. They want one environment to manage them from. They want they want one set of skills to be able to deploy new workloads, and some of them even just want one bill for all their cloud environments, right? And so that's why hybrid cloud is seeing such significant growth at the moment. It's not that we're moving away from public, but we want to simplify the management of our cloud environments. And that's what that was the promise of hybrid cloud, if you remember, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It took a few years to deliver, but that's what now the hybrid cloud providers and the hybrid cloud management platforms are really starting to deliver. So I'm going to quickly move to my next poll question, which is pretty much that same one. I'm interested to seeing how much the audience on this call reflects the data that we see more broadly across the Asia Pacific region. So the question here is, what's the primary cloud deployment model in your organization? Public cloud, hosted private, on-premises private, or hybrid? Just give you 20 or 30 seconds to put that response in. Once again, Chris, how are the responses coming in? Are people having a chance to click on the?
Yeah, all good, all good.
Cool. So let's jump to the results if we've got a good bunch of responses there. Oh, fascinating, right? So you know, in many respects, you're ahead of where the average is in Asia Pacific. It's probably why you're on this call. You want to know more about hybrid cloud, how you can make it really work even more effectively within your business. Interesting how much private there is still out there. You know, with all the talk about AWS and Azure and Google and the other big hyperscalers, Oracle, etc. You know, it gives you an impression that private's going away, but it's not. There's still a lot of it out there. So interesting to see that. So jumping into the rest of my presentation. What we are seeing today is that the location of your workload doesn't have to be an inhibitor of the agility or the innovation or the speed or the cost of that workload. It used to be the case 3, 4, 5 years ago, nearly any IT question that got asked, the answer to that question was public cloud, right? And I found this quote a couple of weeks ago online from this gentleman, Mark Thiel, pretty well-known gentleman, particularly in the edge space. And he, as this quote, I think describes it really well, that cloud is the correct destination for the correct workload at the correct time with the proper organization and ownership plan. And so basically they're saying, we have to make decisions around cloud, right? The benefit today we have is that the location isn't an inhibiting factor. Having a private cloud environment, you know, isn't going to slow your organization down like it used to 3, 4, 5 years ago. So why is hybrid cloud witnessing strong growth? Well, there are a lot of small reasons we found. First of all, there's CFOs jumping in going, well, we've made these investments in our data centers, in equipment. We need to write those investments down, you know, over the typical accounting period that we do that. So let's make the most of them while we've got it. We also see a lot of organizations say that they're running edge applications. We're seeing much more interest in video analytics. We're seeing more sensors being deployed. We're seeing infrastructure get smarter buses and cars and trains and stations and wharves and buildings, etc. Like every piece of big infrastructure, stadiums, right? Are starting to get sensors through them. They're becoming part of the edge. You're not going to be turning your lights on and off and doing your watering system in a sports stadium through a public cloud console, right? There's going to be some edge there. So, and there's also going to be some legacy apps that are just too expensive, too hard, too complex, and without the right ROI to port them across to the public cloud, even in a lift and shift environment. And then regulations are a big part of it too. You know, in this roundtable I ran early this week, we had banks in the room, and they obviously have significant regulation around where workloads have to run. But we actually had some people from gambling organizations, and they said one of them had 7 regulators, each of which made a decision on where workloads need to be run, and often with no real rhyme or reason as to why that workload needed to be run there. But whether you liked it or not, you had to comply with that decision, right? So there's regulations that we have to meet. So there's all these little reasons which add up to a lot of why we need to really embrace hybrid cloud, why we need to simplify the management of our cloud workloads across the many environments that they're going to be running in the future. And ultimately, as Mark Thiel was saying, we need the decision matrix, right, about where our workloads need to run. Questions like this around specific workload needs, security compliance requirements, how scalable the solution needs to be, the disaster recovery plan, how you're going to migrate the workloads, the latency performance needs, that's where edge is going to be important, the importance of the location of the data and the data gravity elements. And do we have the necessary resources and expertise to manage, you know, our current and the new cloud environments? These are the questions that once you start to ask these and get the answers to them, it will obviously, you know, often pretty obviously dictate that, well, we should have it on premise or in this cloud environment or that one there. But with an understanding these days that none of the locations have to be a reason why that's going to be any worse a location than the other. So I'm hoping I've sort of set the scene of what's going on in the cloud world here in Asia Pacific. I'm now going to hand over to Harris, who's going to be talking specifically about some of the private cloud capabilities that are starting to emerge that's making hybrid cloud, a really strong option for any business across the region. Harris, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to share my screen here. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you a quick overview of GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise. And then I'll make sure we leave plenty of time for discussion. But I'd encourage everyone who's joined live today, please ask questions. We'd be very happy to answer them today. That's the benefit of a live event. So, for those of you who followed HPE anytime in the last decade, I'm sure you've heard about HPE GreenLake. For those who don't know, HPE GreenLake is our brand that we go to market for our private cloud offering. And, one of the key differentiators of HPE GreenLake is that it can be deployed in the location of your choosing. It could go in your own data center, it could go in a colo facility, or in a partner hosted model, or at an edge location. And so that provides the flexibility to put the compute and storage and networking close to where the work needs to be done and where the data needs to be generated. And that is obviously one of our key differentiators. But we deliver it as a cloud model. So it provides self-service. It allows you to pay for what you use on a consumption basis, to be scaled up and to scale down. And as you'll see, one or more layers are managed by the cloud provider themselves. That would be either us or an HP partner who's delivering GreenLake on your behalf. Now, GreenLake has been around for some time. It's nearly 10 years old, and the platform has evolved. Maybe you're a GreenLake customer today, or you've looked at GreenLake in the past, and you're probably familiar with what we now call our GreenLake Flex offering, which allows us to build a customized private cloud platform for your specific needs and requirements. But now that family has evolved and grown, and now we're in an era where we're providing cloud automation, data management, and protection in that platform in a more standardized offering. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a bit more about today. So this shows just a cross section of all of the different GreenLake services in the HPE catalog today. This is an enormous list, and I'm certainly not going to go through all this today, but it's really just to emphasize the point that GreenLake is not just a single product or a single platform, but it is a family of related cloud services in different categories. What we're going to talk about today, of course, is GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise, which is down there on the bottom left, as you can see. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. But certainly, if you have other questions around GreenLake, or if you have other areas you want to explore, please leave that in your feedback, and we'll be very happy to follow up with you and answer those questions. But today, we're focusing on Private Cloud Enterprise. So the question is, what is Private Cloud Enterprise, and what is it trying to address? So if you've been involved in the private cloud space before and you've worked in this sector, historically, private clouds were very complicated. They were kind of a do-it-yourself, like IKEA furniture. You had to put it together, and hopefully you did it properly. You had to do everything on your own. They were all self-managed, and it was very hard to deliver them on a consumption basis because you'd have to buy all the infrastructure up front as a capital expenditure, and so billing that back on a consumption basis was hard to do. And so Private Cloud Enterprise is really meant to address some of those pain points of earlier private cloud incarnations. So for one, we want to make it really quick to get up and running. We want to make sure it's both modular and scalable. We need to support a range of offerings. It needs to have a management capability. It needs to be delivered as a service. It needs to have, pay-as-you-go economics, pay per use, and provide the transparency and predictability of cost that customers have come to expect. Now, this is a logical diagram which shows you sort of the basic architecture of GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise, or PCE. There are 3 services available. There's bare metal, virtual machines, and containers, as you see there in the middle of the slide. All of them they live on top of a common pool of infrastructure for which we have automated provisioning. We offer self-service. We have a single integrated portal that can show you not only your GreenLake infrastructure, but other cloud environments. And we have different pre-built modules that are optimized for different workloads. So you can have the confidence to run anything from a very simple web application to a highly complex multi-tiered mission critical application can all run on GreenLake PCE. Now here's another kind of view of that. So again, you can see the core services in the middle there. There's a data fabric that sits on top of it for storing and accessing your data. And then there's other services that live on top of that platform. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize is that this is not just a closed ecosystem. GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise has APIs and connectors, and that allows you to connect your PCE environment to a public cloud environment like a Microsoft Azure or an AWS or a Google, and not only view what's going on in those environments, but also do provisioning directly from the GreenLake PCE management console. And that's what achieves that vision that Tim was referring to of that single control plane, that single pane of glass, that clear visibility into your hybrid environment. Now, one of the, I think, big changes, from HPE is we're trying to simplify the experience and the process that customers go through to get an environment scoped and provisioned. And the way we do that is rather than having you worry about the specific hardware model and all the different, technical variables that you would need when you order traditional infrastructure, we've simplified the ordering process so that you can think about your, let's say, compute instances or virtual machines in terms of their use case and the families. And if you've worked with the hyperscalers before, this model would be very familiar with you. So we ask you the types of workloads you want to run. Again, is it a web application? Is it a database application? Is it SAP? Is it Splunk? Is it a data lake? And then we can map that to a predefined family of virtual machines that are optimized for that. And you can mix and match them, of course. You can run, a combination of these all simultaneously in PCE. We do the same thing for storage as well. So we have standard storage for more traditional, workloads, and then we have high performance block storage for those highly transactional workloads. Now, I'd also wanted to mention that we offer a marketplace where third-party ISVs can publish solutions that have been certified and tested to run on GreenLake PCE. And that gives customers the confidence that they can run their application on there successfully. And if for whatever reason they have a problem, they can contact either vendor, and through our partnership, we can assist them. And that gives them the confidence to know that it's a safe platform for them to choose and that their application has already been certified. I'd also wanted to mention that GreenLake PCE is a platform designed for developers and organizations that have embraced DevOps. And we've built in native support for many of the popular tools in this space, whether that be HashiCorp Terraform, Red Hat Ansible, Puppet, and Chef are all supported in GreenLake PCE. And we offer a CLI and API interface for those who prefer to interact with the platform in code rather than in the UI. And so again, to summarize, what we're trying to do with GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise is give customers a consistent experience no matter where their cloud is deployed, whether it's in the public cloud, in their own data center, or at the edge. We want to give customers confidence that they have a platform that can run their workloads and that they will perform and deliver on their expectations. We want to give customers choice and make sure that they have an open ecosystem that follows standards. And finally, we want to give them a low and predictable total cost of ownership so they know that they can get a return on their investment. And just to leave you, if those of you are interested and you want to find out more and get a little bit of hands-on time with the GreenLake PCE, we do offer a test drive for customers. You can type that link into your browser or scan the QR code, and that'll take you to a free environment where you can try out PCE for yourself so you can experience it. And with that, I'll hand back to Chris. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Harris. So we are about to step into the this little Q&A between Harris and Tim, but just a reminder that please put your own questions in the Q&A box. But before we do that, I just have a couple of, actually 3 questions for you. So the first question that is hopefully going to come up on your screen now is, do you have a documented cloud strategy that has been endorsed by your executive leadership team? So we have 3 options here. So if you could please let us know your thoughts, and we will show you the results momentarily. I can see the results coming up on screen, so it's quite interesting actually, where we're sitting, and I'm anticipating that Tim will also find it quite interesting. All right, I'll give you another 10 seconds, and then I will end this and bring it up on screen for you all. All right, there we go. Tim, Harris, what do you think of this?
Yeah, well, that looks very mixed results. That is quite interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, I'm glad, you know, appreciate people responding to this, because, you know, this is where I see a lot of organizations struggle. If there isn't a clear strategy, if there isn't executive endorsement, a lot of cloud programs don't succeed, or they stall, or they don't really deliver on the benefits because they're not clearly articulated. So thanks for sharing that. And, you know, if people want to talk a bit more about how we can help with your strategy and you know, make it a little bit more firm and clear, that's certainly something we're happy to discuss today.
And the only point I'm going to make about that is that I read that as 35% yes. If you're unsure, then the answer is effectively no. Right? Yeah, because you're probably making an investment that's not on strategy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, or the strategy is a document that just, you know, sits in a hard drive somewhere and no one ever read it, right? Which is a problem.
Yeah, so this one's fairly straightforward. So this one's multiple choice, so you can answer as many as you want. But on which cloud platforms are you currently using today? So yeah, as said, you can select more than one.
Fascinated in seeing the response here. Because I think depending on where you are in the region and the maturity of the customer, it's you get a very different response.
All right, hoping to see a few more responses if we could. Let's give it another 10 seconds and it'll be up on screen for a minute. All right, great. I'll end that and I will share the results with you. Can you see that, Tim?
Yeah.
Harris, yep.
That's
All
great.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, guys. I'm surprised. I thought the AWS would be higher. You know, it's interesting to see Azure's dominance in this group, and also Google was higher than I anticipated as well. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Great.
Love the Greenlight customers. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And no one's willing to admit they're running Apex, so that's fine.
All right, and then the last question before we move on to your Q&A is this one, fairly straightforward one. So how are you tracking with your cloud adoption execution? Would you say you are on track, running into challenges, or not started? So please indicate your response here.
Something I was surprised about at the roundtable is that there are a bunch of organizations that are really still at their beginning of their cloud journey. You know, that really haven't even started. You know, because we're 15 years into the public cloud in particular, right, into AWS. So I was expecting that most people had started, but that's not really the case. And there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe it's better to start now because there's so many more options available.
No, I think that's a good point, Tim. And I think there are times, this is a good example of that, where sometimes the marketing has gotten ahead of the market. You know, if you read various IT publications, you know, they'll say, oh, you know, the cloud's been adopted, you know, problems are solved. And, you know, that's just not the case for a lot of the organizations that we deal with. They have legitimate reasons why they haven't adopted it.
Again, you're going to find this interesting.
Very even split. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. And I think that is a good representation, really. That there are a lot of people having challenges, and a lot of people are still at the beginning of their journey, right? It's and again, you know, if there's a time to be at the beginning of the journey, it would be today, because so many more options are available today than were even 12, 24 months ago. So
fantastic. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes until we end. So Tim Harris, I will hand back to you. And then, yeah, just once more, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to those in a few minutes. Tim Harris, over to you.
cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. So, look, the next probably 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to ask Harris a few questions, and Harris, feel free to ask me any back if you want. But well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. Great to see how far hybrid and private cloud has really come over the last few years. I'm really, you know, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, people asking, is hybrid cloud a real thing? You went, oh, not really. But you know, it was a good idea, hard to do, and now it's easy to do, right? And anyone can get access to it. But I'm interested in particular around the types of businesses that you see, Harris, running hybrid clouds, like, or the private clouds like HPE, private cloud for enterprise, and what workloads they're running in those environments today.
Well, you know, the truth is, we don't necessarily target GreenLake to a specific industry. You know, it is a general purpose compute and storage platform. But having said that, we do see certain industries that really gravitate towards it. And that's because of the nature of their business. So I'll give you a few examples. You know, we see manufacturers that, you know, need technology, you know, on the factory floor, you know, right where the machines operate. You know, we see that very commonly. Or we see retailers who say, hey, listen, you know, we have data centers, but we also have things that have to run in the store. You know, we need our point of sale has to work, and our finance system has to work, and all these things need to operate. And if our store loses the WAN link, it still needs to function. Or, you know, I'm a mining company and I have operations in remote regions, and by the way, our internet goes down every day. You know, that's a normal part of our day-to-day lives. So those industries that have what we call those edge scenarios, right, are you know, heavy adopters of GreenLake, because their IT environments are hybrid by nature. And they love that model to say, well, we want our platform to work that way. We don't want to have to be the one to have to integrate and make all this complexity work. We want a solution that's built to work in our scenario. So that's where we've seen some of the greatest traction with GreenLake thus far.
Cool. And so I know you touched on this in your presentation, but could you sort of clarify who's responsible for what with HPE PCE, the private platform? How does it actually work? If, let's say I want to buy it, you know, like, am I managing it? What's the decision factors I have to consider there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, let's take the question of responsibility, right? So GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise follows the shared responsibility model that customers have come to expect in the public cloud. And so, you know, many of you, I'm sure, have seen that layer cake diagram. You know, there's layers that the cloud provider owns. They own the hardware, they own the switching, they own, you know, the hypervisor. And then there's the layers above that the customer is responsible for, the application and the data, right? So GreenLake Private Cloud Enterprise follows that same model. So for each service, whether it be virtual machines or bare metal or containers, there's a layer that is managed by the cloud provider, either HPE or the partner, and that's built into the service. So, you know, you don't pay extra when you go to Azure for Microsoft to keep their cloud running. The same thing's true in PCE. It's built in to the pricing model. So you have that clarity around what a workload actually costs.
Okay. And so understanding that, what's the sort of decision and purchasing process? Like someone who wants to buy HPE private cloud for enterprise, like who's making that decision? Like, how are they building the business case? who's responsible for building the business case? Like, are you seeing there's certain teams that you tend to deal with a lot, or that your partners tend to work with a lot to roll their solutions?
Primarily, I would say, I mean, of course, we work with IT teams. That's critical, and there's no surprises there. But especially in this current environment, we're also dealing just as much with finance as we are with IT, and that's because of a couple reasons. I think one, it's a reflection of the position that our customers are in, right now, and they're heavily scrutinizing their costs, and they're making sure that there's a clear ROI, and finance is critical in that conversation. But there's also some really interesting questions that come up, when it comes to cloud providers, which we've talked about a lot in the last number of years, which is, is all of my cloud costs, are they all OpEx? Or is it actually a mix of CapEx and OpEx? And, IT departments, I love them to death, but that's really not their area of expertise. And so finance typically gets involved, and we have found, as HPE, that, we have technical subject matter experts to help customers work through the technical questions around picking the right cloud platform, about, will this workload run best here? Will it perform well, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have a team that deals with our counterparts in finance at our customers to help them work through some of those tricky financial issues in terms of their reporting. And it's not because we're, financial experts, but it's a really important question that customers need to ask. It's not just about what it costs, but how they have to pay for it, how the cash flow works, and then how they put it on their balance sheet.
I imagine there's some decision factors that are becoming more important in some organizations anyway, around sustainability, right? Like, what happens to the equipment at the end of life, right? That's, I know in Europe it's starting to be legislated, right? So it's certainly going to come to Asia sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, and I do think that is becoming increasingly important. More and more companies are, have clearly articulated sustainability goals, in their annual reports, and they might have a regulator or two that they have to report to, and then some. If you're a public company, you might have activist shareholders who care about that sort of thing. So sustainability is very important, and I think there's some confusion in this space. Some companies think, well, if I move a workload to the public cloud, then the sustainability issues go away because, well, someone else is running it, so that doesn't count against me. And unfortunately, it's just simply not true. There's a lot of, I think, an appeal of cloud providers that, they can make my problem go away, and it's just simply not the case. You can't outsource risk. You can't outsource compliance, and you can't outsource sustainability. Those are all things you're accountable for, regardless of where you run the workload.
And for organizations that like the look of private cloud enterprise, but want to run it in a colo or managed facility, do you have any preferred partners or any partners you work with, or how would you do that if you don't want to put it in your own data center?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and our key message here is it's about choice. Because what we have recognized is that the model of saying everyone has to move into a data center in a small number of cities around the world, that doesn't work for all customers. We're very fortunate that we have a huge breadth of partners to address a range of scenarios, and so we don't stipulate to a customer, you must use this partner or that partner. But my guidance is this, right? And because it's going to vary depending upon your market, because we've got a big audience today. Think about your technical requirements around latency. Think about the relationships that you have. If you have a trusted partner that you work with who's also an HPE partner, they're probably a good candidate. Obviously, they have to provide reliable power and cooling and redundancy and all of those important things that you do for a colo provider. But ultimately, GreenLake is at its core, it's infrastructure. And so as long as we have the right facility to put it in, we can run in a range of environments. Now, one interesting development that some customers like to do, and again, this is not mandatory, and it goes back to what you're saying about having one bill. We have some partners who allow us to put their colo charges onto the GreenLake bill. So rather than getting, a bill from HPE and a bill from the colo provider, we can actually combine them and give you one integrated billing model. And for some customers, that's important. Doesn't change how the service is delivered, but it does change the way that we invoice.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you. We're now going to, I know for the last 5 minutes or so, open up to a more broader Q&A. I know, Chris, we've got a few questions that have come in from the audience. So hand a request to throw those questions at us.
Cool. Okay. So we've got 3 so far. Anyone else want to add any in, please let us know. So does HPE resell the hyperscaler offering when AWS, for example, when that's what's best for the application workload? Does that?
It's a great question. I'm happy to take that. So let me answer that in a couple of ways. So the first and foremost is, one, we absolutely recognize, just like, I think we all agree, and based upon the survey, that not every workload should run in a public cloud. I would say the same thing, to be fair. Some workloads absolutely make sense in a public cloud, and HPE, through our partnership with the hyperscalers, we embrace that. So we absolutely, recognize that makes sense. We are a reseller for the 3 major hyperscalers, Microsoft, AWS, and Google. And so we can include those into a GreenLake bill if a customer wants that, as a commercial convenience. But we don't require that we're the reseller either. So if you have an existing subscription with Microsoft or AWS, we can bring that into the GreenLake console, whether we're the reseller or not. All we need is the appropriate level of permissions through your subscription, and we can bring that in. So whether we're the reseller or not, we can provide that multi-cloud experience.
Great. Okay. The next question. I've heard people talking about cloud repatriation, i.e. bringing workloads from public cloud back to on-premise. Is this something that you're really seeing happening?
I'll start with this one, Harris, and I think we probably both agree on this, that it is being talked about a lot, right? This idea of cloud repatriation. To be honest, I don't think it's a real thing. I don't see it as a significant trend happening across a lot of organizations. What I do see, however, is organizations fixing mistakes from the past, right? So, back in the day when, the strategy was everything's going to go public cloud, right? And there were some things that just didn't make sense to go public cloud. I've got a client in the media space that moved all of their storage. So I think media storage, just many terabytes of data. They were pretty much told, oh, we have to move that all into a public cloud environment. They did that in their first month. Their bill was as much as their annual budget for storage, right? Because, it had to be high availability, a lot of this storage, right? Cost them a lot of money. And they realized that was a mistake. So yes, that workload was repatriated back into their data center. So that's what I see going on. As I don't see a big wave of organizations going, oh, let's move things back from AWS and Azure, et cetera, into our data center. I just see people correcting mistakes from the past. Harris, your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think whenever I hear this question, I always feel like, it's, from an analyst who's looking for like, oh, let me take a short position on a hyperscaler. It's not a real thing, in my opinion. I agree with you. I think the customers who are doing this well, in my opinion, are making the decision on a workload by workload basis. There isn't a monolithic answer for any organization. I wish it could be simple. Some customers would love a simple answer like, just tell me what to do, just tell me where to put everything, and I'll be done with it. And it's unfortunately not that simple, because the workloads are unique. They have different requirements. And so I do see customers that took that all into public cloud approach a few years ago. A lot of that was driven by COVID, the rush to, oh, we have to be able to work remotely. Let's get it in the public cloud and then we'll deal with the problems later. Now that we've returned to, a more of a hybrid kind of work mode, now I think companies are revisiting those kind of decisions and saying, we made a hurried decision a few years ago. Now let's revisit and, build something that makes sense for how our employees are working today. And that, in the vast majority of cases, lends itself to a hybrid. So yeah, we see a few workloads that shouldn't have been put in public cloud and have come back. But really what we see, I think it's more of a story of the workloads evolving from being what we call traditional IT, or non-cloud workloads, moving to public and private cloud. I think that's more of a trend that we see accelerating rather than things coming out of the public cloud.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you. So last question, and then I'll just have a few quick polling questions that'll just help us with our follow-up with you afterwards. Excuse me. My CEO keeps talking about wanting to be in the cloud. How are other IT leaders managing that conversation?
I'll jump in again, if you don't mind, Harris.
No, go for it.
We do see that a lot. It's been a big trend where, you know, CEOs and leadership teams and boards of directors have read or been to a conference and heard about, you know, some great cloud capability, and they say, we want to be a cloud business. We want to be like them. And they point to Spotify or Netflix or someone like that because they're a cloud business, right? You know, the reality is what they're saying is we want to be an agile, fast business. You know, we want to be able to pivot quickly. We want to be able to go after opportunities at pace. Now, cloud is absolutely an enabler of that, but cloud isn't the destination. Right? Cloud is just an enabler. Right? You're not saying being a cloud business means nothing. You can be a terrible business in the cloud if you really wanted to, if you tried hard, right? And there are actually plenty of terrible businesses in the cloud.
And you can be in the cloud and not be agile at all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right? Just a quick heads up of something that we are seeing change at the moment is the CEOs are now saying, I want to be an AI business, right? I want to be an intelligent business, right? I think there's probably a bit more sense to this. I think being an intelligent business makes more sense than being a cloud business. But again, being driven by all the media around artificial intelligence at the moment. And again, cloud is going to be a significant enabler of you being an intelligent business. What you need to do in your business is give yourself every opportunity to succeed by having agile, you know, cost-effective infrastructure and development environments, embrace, you know, cloud development, etc., to be able to give yourself every chance to succeed, to become that business that your CEO and ultimately your customers want you to be.
Absolutely. And you know, just to add to that, I would say, you know, a couple things in terms of the executive level conversations. You know, I think the motives are good. And you know, I think it's great that, you know, executives are thinking about these issues. But I'd say, you know, two pieces of feedback. One is, let's make sure as a business that you articulate the benefits as to why. Okay, we're going to the cloud. Why? What do we want to achieve? How do we measure that? How do we make sure that we are succeeding and that we're moving in a direction that offers business value? You know, that was a theme of one of the customer roundtables I had recently was, you know, cloud is great, but so what? Where's the business value? That's, I think, really important. The second thing is where I think sometimes executives, what they miss is that these cloud native businesses don't just use cloud as a platform, but they've transformed the way they operate. They have an agile cloud operating model, okay? And a lot of executives, I think, miss that point, that to get the benefits of cloud, it's not just about putting workloads on a platform, but it's about the organizational change required to unlock those benefits. Or another very simple way of saying that is, if every business process you have takes 15 steps and 7 approvals and 2 weeks to complete, and you move those workloads to the public cloud, you're going to have exactly the same thing. Because if your business isn't agile, the cloud platform's not going to fix that. So your transformation around cloud needs to be holistic. You can't forget about people and process. Those are critically important. It's not just a technology move.
With that, it does bring us to the end of today's session. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'd just like to thank everyone. Thank you all for staying on until the end. Thank you, Harris. Thank you, Tim. And we wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.